When it comes to the notion of science and faith being on opposite ends of the spectrum with regards to a rational theory of the origin of our universe, we seem to come across something of a paradox in my estimation. I say that because, as a follower of Christ, a believer in the Bible and the lessons it contains, and the faith I have in God's works and truth as a result, and the understanding that He alone created everything we exist within and without, I realise that the scientific endeavour comes with its own faith. The mainstream narrative, when we dive into the question of creation, accepts and even demands that religion is faith-based and science is factual. And I have to say I agree. Religion is faith-based. A faith in a creative agent who is personal, whose attributes we carry within us, and who made us and all of creation to His own ends and for His own purposes. A faith that tells me that everything from nothing story is absurd, especially when the definition of nothing itself is even a topic for debate among scholars in scientific and theistic communities. That being said, science is also faith-based, and not nearly as factual as its devotees might have you believe. It starts with a faith that nothing happens deliberately on the cosmic stage. Despite zero evidence of that single statement, science cannot tell us that everything happens by chance and expect a belief in that without evidence. Now, I'm not saying that science doesn't hold answers, quite the opposite. As I outlined in my first film, science holds the answers to a mind-bending amount of questions. And it's perhaps the most important pursuit to the human race, if we want answers to some of life's more profound questions. Why are we here? How are we here? What are we for? These questions, however, science can't provide the answer to. We have a theory: expansion, the Big Bang. The idea that, in its dumbed down sense, at some point, absolute nothingness, even the absence of space and time themselves, became something. On the face of it, this is madness. Here you have nothing, we need a universe to emerge. How do we do that? Let's assume we're trying to create a universe, and we begin with nothing. No time, no space, no gravity, no material for gravity to exert its force upon, even if we had it. What would we do? Well, experts say there were particles in this nothingness, and over time, which we don't have yet, a so-called cosmic cloud arose and the particles somehow interacted with one another. The cosmic cloud became ever more compressed and dense until eventually, the gravity, which we don't have yet, acted upon all this and forced atoms together at the cosmic level. They heated up, merged, and eventually got so compressed it gave rise to what some like to call the primordial fireball. This to me sounds a bit like a similar explanation of the formation of a star, but I'm not a scientist. I'm just trying to understand it. So the science, it seems, is faith-based. To entertain this absurd idea, you have to make some assumptions about the nature of nothing. What is it? Where is it? Can it spontaneously create more of itself? If it can, do you now have something that isn't nothing? I don't know about you, but I feel an intelligence beyond our own is sounding quite appealing at the moment. So, we're in a space that isn't space just yet. No time, no atoms, no space clouds, no gravity. What has to occur? Nothing, even if it self-replicated, would be more nothing, wouldn't it? Nothing can self-replicate, obviously, but let's allow that. You still have more of nothing. All science can do is analyse and observe all that we have today. All the atoms and particles and cosmic shenanigans we experience and see give rise to many questions, and science has given us plenty of answers. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing that science is stupid and we should dispose of the whole thing. I love science. Some of my favourite documentaries as a child and through my adolescent years were those of the pursuit of answers through science, especially when it came to space. Science is astoundingly brilliant at drawing rational conclusions to some of the questions we held as unanswerable 100 years ago. We can cure diseases long thought to be terminal. We can calculate the paths of the planets and stars through the night sky with astounding precision, thanks to the early work of mathematicians and philosophers from centuries ago, and indeed some of the brightest contemporary minds like the late Stephen Hawking, and the likes of Richard Feynman, Albert Einstein, and so on. There are so many things science has unveiled to us that have improved life on Earth for so many, that we take leaps forward as its validity in its reasoning behind creation, as if the same mechanism which gives us an understanding of how stars are formed must have the right answer when it's applied to the beginning of everything. It's a dangerous train of thought, but its appeal is nothing to be dismissed. It's attractive, alluring, and a quick fix to a complex problem, and don't we just love those? The alternative is a god, a creative agent using his intelligence and deliberate intent to create the universe before there was one. Now, this god would need to exist outside the realm of time and space in order that he could create both of those. He'd also have to be an uncreated creator, in so much that he existed prior to nothingness, that he is an eternal being, immaterial and of spirit, and so had no beginning. This is something that many members of the scientific community often chalk up to crazy ramblings and move on without addressing them at all. And I suspect that it's because they feel as if to get into such a debate would tarnish their precious reputations on the world stage. And fair enough, nobody wants that. We can't conceptualize the idea that something exists without a beginning too easily. It's so abstract to us, since we're in a physical dimension, that to try processing such a statement requires a level of thought and introspection that most of us, in all honesty, can't be bothered with. So we turn to what the man on the TV says about our origins, using crude graphics and computer-generated images to convey a narrative that captivates us just enough that we simply sit back comfortably in the knowledge that we know more than we did yesterday. And therefore, the TV's speaking the truth. The brainiacs have gone and proved the theory of evolution by telling us that enough time and the need to adapt to surroundings meant that this puddle-dwelling gloop with no biological matter decided it needed to be alive in order to keep being alive. I don't mean to ridicule anybody who holds this belief. I did. But the more I pondered such things and the more questions I saw answered by science, the more it pointed in my mind to a creator. Look at the seed to an oak tree. Ignore everything else, birds, oceans, volcanoes, deep sea thermals, stars, the sun, the moon, galaxies, everything. Ignore all that for a second and focus on one oak seed. It's no bigger than a nut, yet inside there is all the information necessary for a fully formed, mighty oak tree capable of existing for who knows how long. This little nut-sized wonder is never going to be anything but an oak tree. Why? Because its genetic code is already written within. It's going to go in the ground, where it fell from another of its kind, germinate, sprout, and develop tiny feeble stems. Then a couple of teeny tiny leaves that look as if a gentle breeze might break them. Then in no time at all, you've got a sapling, a young oak tree. The thing is growing and growing, more and more every day, doing as the written code inside its genetic markers dictate. From this single seed, all the material necessary for a fully fledged oak tree emerges. This one phenomenon by itself, once analysed, should tell you that accidents don't happen in this universe. Science does a phenomenal job of explaining the natural world, because of our ability to rationalise and perceive things, understand and interpret information, and convey our understanding to one another. We have an overall picture of the world, the universe, and even things that are invisible to the naked eye. We know about the existence of tiny particles, electrons, neutrinos, all those on the subatomic scale. We've been able to manipulate some of them, resulting in experiments like those being performed at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. We've seen them in the natural state, behaving as we expect them to based on calculations and hypotheses made by brains far greater than mine. And we've observed some of these particles behaving far less like we expected, raising more questions than answers. They say that you and I are a complex result of processes which took place over the course of an insane amount of time, from our earliest common ancestor in that puddle over billions of years up until today. We are what was inevitably going to emerge from all that unguided chemical transformations and adaptations that the laws of nature, which came from nowhere, dictate. The brilliant mathematician and Christian apologist Professor John Lennox touches on this idea in a lot of his debates and lectures. He doesn't take credit for the analogy, and I am paraphrasing, but he essentially says that using your immensely complex brain, you perform these thought exercises and draw conclusions based on your understanding of things, and that the ability to even do such a thing requires an unparalleled amount of complexity, given that we were forged from a swamp billions of years ago, as single-celled organisms, with no brains to do any thinking with, and by extension, no intent, no eyes to see with, so no ability to prioritize or distinguish between significant or insignificant targets of our attention. No lungs, kidney, heart, blood, skin, no nothing. But here's the magic. Somewhere along the line, this organism, which spontaneously and without cause, guidance or will, had life breathed into it, made a step up in evolution and divided itself. So now there were two of them, with no brain, eyes, heart and so on. So we've got two of the same thing, this apparently useless single cell, which gave rise to itself from a puddle. Lennox dives deep into this thinking and he comes to a simple but profound question. If you're willing to swallow that nonsense and agree with the narrative that we all came from nothing, and it was inevitable over a long enough timescale, this means that the very brain in your head is nothing more than the result of a series of unguided, complex biochemical accidents with little tweaks and alterations made along the way, with no intention behind it, no guiding hand and no intelligence whatsoever. No mind gave rise to your brain, and yet you trust it. You trust what you think is real, your ideas, opinions, thoughts, decisions, conclusions and all the rest of it. Your brain was an accident, evolved over time with no designer or architect with any level of thought, and you trust it. He points out the absurdity of that, and you don't have to think for very long before reaching the same conclusion. You'd have to be delusional to assume that an accidental brain is capable of providing you with anything significant, let alone that the life form which gave rise to it came from a swampy mess billions of years ago, which existed in and of itself, and, if we assume it's true, was doing fine without the need for any adaptations at all in the first place. Lennox also points out that while science is descriptive, insofar as it can describe natural events and phenomena as we witness them, can observe them, and it's predictive, in that science can predict future cosmic events. It can suggest what will happen inside an atom under many given circumstances, and as I discussed earlier, where Jupiter will be in 100 years' time. But science is not creative. It has no answers to creation, where it began. Any scientist worth his salt will tell you that the theory of the Big Bang is exactly that, a theory. It's the best guess at the moment. Let me reiterate, I'm not saying you're stupid to subscribe to such a belief. Delusion comes from the persistent attack on your cognitive abilities and perception. Adolf Hitler said once, if you tell a lie, no matter how big it is, often enough, people will believe it. And that's what's happened throughout human history. A succession of false doctrines and apparent facts leading us all away from the truth that has always been with us we just never bothered to read into it. Science does not in any way contradict faith. It's faith-based. We put our faith in our own abilities to understand, calculate, analyse and observe without ever questioning said abilities, like it's a given that we can do so. God made you, so you can learn how to live in His perfect righteousness, for His purpose and His glory. The rest of it, you dreamed up yourself.